So you may have noticed that this unit circle has a whole lot of repetition in it, right? All of those red terminal points that we had around the unit circle have the same X and Y coordinate. But that really wasn't new information. All you really have to know is what quadrant you're in so you can slap a negative on the correct coordinate, right? So what we did with reference angles at the end of class last time was to say that all of those red spokes are all of the angles that have a 30-degree reference angle. All of those blue spokes are the angles that have a 45-degree reference angle. So if you know the reference angle and you know what quadrant you're in, you can predict what the sine and cosine and tangent are without having to have that whole unit circle. And we can even use it to move beyond for angles bigger than 360 degrees or negative angles that aren't explicitly labeled on our unit circle. So let's think about what the quadrant tells us about the positive and negative sign on our different trig functions. Okay, so let's think about sine. Sine is the y coordinate of the terminal point. So sine is going to have a positive value when you're up in a positive y coordinate range, negative when you're down below the x-axis. So sine is positive here, and it's negative down here in the third and fourth quadrants. Cosine is going to be positive where the x coordinates are positive, which is on the right side of the y-axis. It's going to be negative where the x coordinates are negative. That's over here on the left. Tangent, remember, is just sine over cosine. So we're just going to look at the sine over cosine. First quadrant, sine over cosine, positive over positive. Tangent's going to be positive. Second quadrant, sine over cosine, positive over negative. It's going to give us a negative value for tangent. In the third quadrant, both sine and cosine are negative. So when we divide them, we'll get a positive value for tangent. And then in the fourth quadrant, sine over cosine, negative over positive, gives us a negative value for tangent. All right, so that does not look like a neat and uncomplicated memory device there. We usually summarize this way. All right, this tells us that in the first quadrant, just talking about sine, cosine, and tangent, all three are positive in the first quadrant. Only sine is positive in the second quadrant. Only tangent is positive in the third quadrant, and only cosine is positive in the fourth quadrant. And this is how we remember this. It does spell acts if you go clockwise, but since we usually think of angles going counterclockwise, we can remember all students take calculus or all suckers take calculus, whatever you want to remember. All right, so let's use our new mnemonic device down there in the bottom left and our reference angle terminal points there in the first quadrant of the unit circle to evaluate sine, cosine, tangent of some angles that are not explicitly labeled in our unit circle. So how about sine of negative pi over 4? Let's just draw negative pi over 4. Negative pi over 4 means I go clockwise. Pi over 4 is 45 degrees. All right, so this is a pi over 4 angle, a 45-degree angle. That means, because that's its reference angle, I'm going to be using that terminal point to evaluate the sine. Let's see. Sine is equal to the y coordinate, root 2 over 2. All right, but negative pi over 4 is actually down in the fourth quadrant, right? So that's down here, right? Where it says that only cosine is positive. All right, so that means that sine must be negative down here in the fourth quadrant. So I'm going to put a negative sign on my answer. Negative root 2 over 2. Let's try a few more. Next up, cosine of 390 degrees. Let's draw 390 degrees. That's more than 360 degrees, so it's not on my unit circle. 360, I'm going to need 30 more degrees to get to 390, right? So 30 degrees is actually going to be my reference angle. Reference angles tell you which terminal point flavor to pick. I want the red one. And let's see, I just figured out that I am in the first quadrant where all three sine, cosine, and tangent are positive. So that means I'm going to do a positive version of the x coordinate that I circled, positive root 3 over 2. So again, reference angle is telling me which terminal point to look at. The ASTC mnemonic is telling me whether to make my answer a negative or to leave it positive. Tangent of negative 210 degrees. Let's draw negative 210 and see where we're at. So negative means clockwise. I need to go past 180. I need 30 more. 180 plus 30 will give me 210. So 30 degrees. I accidentally figure out my reference angle by doing that calculation. I've got another red spoke. I need root 3 over 2 comma a half. All right. So let's see, tangent is equal to sine over cosine, so y over x. So I'm going to do 1/2 divided by root 3 over 2. And then I need to use the ASTC mnemonic to decide if I want to make that positive or negative. I'm over here in the second quadrant. So that means only sign is positive. That means tangent's going to be negative. So I'm going to put a negative sign out here and then do the fraction division. So I've got negative 1/2, keep, change, flip the second and multiply. My 2's will cancel and I get negative 1 over the square root of 3. Okay, if you feel like rationalizing that, go ahead. If you have no idea what I mean by that, then don't worry about it. Secant of negative 5 pi over 3. Negative angle, let's draw it. Okay, so pi over 3, let's think. Okay, so negative, here's negative pi. I would think of that as negative 3 pi over 3. Okay, so I need more pi's over 3 than that, right? So I'm going to go here to negative 3 pi over 3. Remember, pi over 3 is that 60-degree angle. So if I do another one, 4 pi over 3 would land me there in the second quadrant. 5 pi over 3 would land me here in the first quadrant. Okay, so there's my negative 5 pi over 3. I had one more pi over 3 angle left in order to get to a full circle. So that's my reference angle. Tells me that I have that terminal point to look at. I'm looking for the secant. That's 1 over the cosine, right? So we're going to do 1 over cosine. Cosine is the x coordinate. And let's see, my angle landed me in the first quadrant, right? So that means I'm going to have a positive value for cosine, positive value for secant. Let's do 1 times, keep, change, flip, and I get a positive 2. Okay, let's try one more. Cosecant of 585 degrees. That is a big angle. Let's see how many angles, how many degrees we have to go. Obviously, I need more than 360 degrees. How much more? So 585 minus 360 is going to be 225. So 225 more. There's another 180. 225 minus 180 is 45. Okay, so I've got a 45-degree angle down here in the third quadrant, 45 degrees, third quadrant. Cosecant is 1 over sine. See, the sine is root 2 over 2. And let's see, sine in the third quadrant, only tangent is positive, so sine is negative, so cosecant is going to inherit that negative sign. And I'm going to do negative 1 times 2 over root 2. And I get negative 2 over root 2. If you are a denominator rationalizer, this one is a really nice one. This actually turns out to be just the negative square root of 2 if you simplify that, but it's fine. I'm not going to make you rationalize, so 2 over root 2 is a good answer.